Toyota 4Runners are the best SUVs for your money. Now they're a far cry from the early 4Runner. The early 4Runner, 1984, had a whopping 110 horsepower, 4-cylinder engine with a carburetor on it. Their small Toyota pickup that they added seats in the back. It's pretty much what it was. They were very reliable, but they rode like pickup trucks. They were clunky. They didn't have much horsepower. Check it out. It's got a big V6 engine with 270 horsepower. Quite an upping from the 110 that the original one had. And of course, it's fuel injected. And if you got an original 4Runner with an automatic transmission and that 4-cylinder, they were dogs. They couldn't get out of their own way. But this thing, it's got a very reliable 5-speed automatic transmission. It even has the manual shifting if you want. With the improvement of modern computer controlled transmissions and this big 270 horsepower V6 engine, this thing's got plenty of power with an automatic. It's got the bulletproof Toyota V6 engine with timing chain, no timing belts to mess with. And there's a differential in the back. You like rear wheel drive vehicles, classic driving, this is for you. Basically, it's a nice large SUV built on a truck chassis, solid rear wheel drive. Now you can get these things in all-wheel drive. My customer didn't want to shore the extra ponies out for all-wheel drive. You don't really need it here in Houston, Texas. But if you're an off-roader, of course, you go for all-wheel drive. Now, of course, they're not giving these things away, but that's where buying these things used can be great, if you can find one. This thing was over 40 G new. My customer picked it up for like $15,000. It was a one-owner trade-in at a Ford dealer. Smart move. Buy a Toyota at a Ford dealer. They can't tell you how great they are because they have to say the Fords are great, so not a bad idea. And check out the interior. This baby's luxurious. It's got the leather seats, sunroof, a lot of room in the back, and of course in the trunk, look at all that space. Room galore, and of course the back seats fold down if you want to have a whole bunch of room for carrying stuff. It's also got a nice trailer hitch so you can tow stuff. And it's got the obligatory roof rack, which in this case is chrome plated. But this is the only part I find funny. It says SR5. Years ago I had a Toyota Corolla SR5. And the SR5 meant something. It was sporty. It had a 5-speed standard transmission. Now in this case, it's got an automatic transmission, so I think it's kind of silly that they put SR5 on the back. Names don't always mean what they used to mean. I guess Toyota just liked the name SR5, and they knew that Americans, they don't want to drive a standard transmission luxury SUV, so they kept the name, but not the transmission. Now, even though it's a 2011, it does have electric power steering, all the bells and whistles, so it gets the best gas mileage you're going to get out of some big thing like this. This particular one gets about 23 miles a gallon on the highway. It's pretty good for a traditional rear-wheel drive, big old trucky vehicle that has 270 horsepower. And let's face it, Toyota's legendary reliability. I have customers with 4Runners at over 500,000 miles on them. And when you compare the looks of this to the old 84 4Runner, you'd think they came from different universes. Of course, it's got 4-wheel discs in the front, discs in the back. The old one had drums in the back. It's got all the bells and whistles of modern cars. This one even has heated seats in the front. You can turn them up or down, whatever heat you want. Because really, if you've ever had leather seats in a car and it's cold outside, those leather seats are cold. The heater really comes in handy then. And it's got great range for an SUV. This one will go over 400 miles on a fill-up. It's got chrome-plated door handles, not those horrible painted ones where the paint chips off. These look a lot snazzier, just like my wife's Lexus. And with their legendary Toyota reliability, these things outlast just about every SUV out there. Don't even waste your time comparing it to, say, a GM or a Chrysler SUV. These things will last 3, 4, 5 times as long. And as I said, if you want to buy the 4-wheel drive version, they're actually decent off-road vehicles. And they sure ride a lot better than the old 4Runners. They were like buckets going down the road. But this thing, it can do both. You can have a nice ride in the city, and if you get a 4-wheel drive one, hey, you can take it off-road too. All my customers, these things, none of them ever took them off-road. It's too nice of a vehicle to take off-road and get it all ruined with mud and rocks, knocking holes in things. Most people will buy a beater If you want a toy for off-road, hey, go buy an old 80s or early 90s 4Runner and use that. But for an everyday luxury SUV, you really can't beat this 2011 4Runner SR5. It's got a lot of luxury, but it's got Toyota reliability. It'll always get you where you want to go, and it's not really a giant gas hog on the highway. And you really can't beat a Toyota Highlander. I have a customer with one that's got 450,000 miles on it, original engine, original transmission. The thing still runs like a clock. And it really doesn't matter what engine you get in it. This one's got the 4-banger. If you want more power, you can get the V6. Let's say you want to put a hitch and tow stuff, I'd advise getting the V6 then versus the 4-cylinder if you're going to do towing. But for normal driving, the 4-cylinder's got plenty enough power. Got 185 horsepower. That's plenty enough to get this SUV going wherever you want to go, and it gets pretty good gas mileage on the highway. You can see there's lots of room inside. Got a big back in this case. This one's set up for its dogs. They're going on vacation, they throw their dogs in the back, and that leaves the dogs with 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 windows they can look out of. Highlanders are notorious for taking abuse and just keep rolling down the road. As you can see, this one's become a receptacle for a bunch of high-flying birds. Still goes perfectly fine. And with the back open, you can really see the kind of space this thing has. It's roomy. You can carry a lot of cargo with it too if you want. But the main aspect of the Highlander is Toyota reliability. My customers with them, if they ever do get another one, because the old one finally wears out with 500,000 miles on it, invariably, they go buy another one. This is his customer's second. And since he's now retired, he claims it's going to be his last car. It very well could be. He's not putting the mileage on it like he used to. This thing's 6 years old, but it's only got 34,000 miles, so I wouldn't be surprised if the car outlasts him. And of course, they come with all the bells and whistles, computer stuff like all the modern cars do. And it sits up high enough. You don't have to worry about speed bumps. You can go through a reasonable amount of water if there's flooding going on. It's not an insanely high vehicle, but if you want a vehicle that's a little bit higher up in the air, check one of these out. And if you want third row seating, that's available on these too. A lot of people always say to me, Scotty, I want something with third row seating. I bought some GM stuff, it was junk, it just fell apart. What can I buy? I tell them to buy a Highlander, and the ones that listen to me, boy, they're always thanking me. Now sure, they're not giving these things away. That's why it's a very good idea to buy one used. We're not talking about something like a Chrysler vehicle that when it's used it's generally falling apart. It's going to be an endless money pit. The Toyotas can last so long that there's nothing wrong with buying a used one. Say the thing's going to last 400,000 miles. Maybe it's only got 100,000 on now. You're going to get a good price with 100,000 miles. If you use your head, just don't pay whatever somebody's asking. If you buy one with 100,000 miles on it, say it goes 400,000 miles, that means it's only used up 25% of its lifespan. And if you only have to pay, say, 30 or 40% of what the original sticker price was, you're making out like a gangbuster. And in the case of this 4-cylinder, look at all the room under the hood. There's all kinds of room. If you do your own maintenance, it's easy to do. It's not crowded in here. There's a lot of working room. Of course, being a Toyota, you probably wouldn't have to do much work on it. I mean, the major things of the older ones were you had to change the timing belts every 100,000 miles or so. But for ages, they use timing chains in these things now. So odds are you're going to buy one. It's going to have a timing chain, and as long as you change your oil frequently, the chains generally last just as long as the engines do. And really, let's face the facts. These mid-size SUVs, they all look pretty much the same. I have a heck of a time myself these days trying to figure out, is it a Toyota? Is it a Jaguar SUV? They even make Porsche SUVs now. I mean, they all pretty much look the same. They got pretty similar styles. And what I like about this one, even though it's 6 years old, it's got the old style grille. It doesn't have that horrible scowl that they all seem to be just falling in love with cars these days. And since these things have so much room, I even have one customer, he lives in his. He travels all over the country, sleeps in it, he's got a refrigerator, he's got all kinds of stuff, power inverter hooked up, watches flat screen TV in it if he wants. All my customers love their Highlanders. Well, except for one. And the problem with that was, he bought it used from a car rental place, and it turns out it had been a gigantic wreck. And they didn't tell him about it. Because a lot of these car rental companies, they're self-insured. So if you go through the record, there may not be any record of the thing being totaled and put back together again because they do it in-house. Another reason not to buy a used car from a car rental agency. And if you're worried about that, heck, just buy a brand new one. My son was looking for a Toyota, and I started looking around for a nice used one for him. And finally he said, "Hey, Dad, forget it. I'm just going to buy a brand new one. Because I'm going to keep the thing for 20, 30 years or more. What the heck? I'm going to get my money's worth out of it, so I don't care." And he just went out and bought a brand new one. But Scotty, hey, I'm cheap. I still would buy a used one. Personally, I just hate wasting money. And if you hate wasting money on a vehicle, get yourself one of these Highlanders. Once you buy it, you're not going to have to worry about much for quite some time. Here's an 07 Acura RDX turbo all-wheel drive, top of the line. Well, this one's 13 years old, still runs like a charm. The Acura speed and handling is still Honda's pretty much legendary reliability, especially in the past. 13-year-old one like this. Now, they weren't giving these things away 13 years ago. This was a $37,000 car because it's a fully loaded one. But for that 37 grand, you got a lot. Check under the hood. Got a 4-cylinder, intercooled, iVTEC, turbocharged engine that puts out 240 horsepower. Obviously it's holding up. This baby doesn't burn oil. Still runs like a scalded ape even though it's 13 years old. It's not that miserly on the gasoline. This particular one, if you drive it slow, gets about 18 in the city and 22 on the highway. Because yes, you pay for speed and for a reasonably large-sized vehicle. Now this is the fully loaded one, all-wheel drive. Check the interior out. Black one, nice leather seats, 13 years old. They're still holding up. And check this out. The armrest isn't ripped yet. It's leather, but it's better than a lot of them. It's not ripped. And of course, being a Honda product, starts right up first time. This one's got a killer stereo system. Oh, the sat nav, everything. Automatic transmission that's pretty bulletproof on this model. Got the sunroof. Needs servicing, but that's what it's here for. I'm going to be doing that. And this baby's turbocharged, so it's got a turbo boost gauge on it. And as we check out the back seat, might help if we unlock it. And as we check out the back seats, got a reasonable amount of room. Now it is older and more bass, so you check out here. It doesn't have a special rear air conditioning unit in it. That's kind of a minus on this car. Killer stereo. There's more speakers back here. Even more inside here. Killer sound system. And lots of leg room. I got the front seat back the whole way, and there's still plenty of room back here. We get back outside. It's got a nice luggage rack on the top. We'll pop the trunk. It's got a reasonable sized trunk. Plus, being an SUV, you can pop the seats down and carry a reasonable amount of stuff in this thing. Also has nice dual exhaust. No, they really don't make enough noise for me. Now you can hear under the hood a little clicking. Well, it's kind of normal for these things as they age. It runs perfectly fine, but with over 100,000 miles on it, these Honda engines will often make a little bit of noise. This particular one, a lot of that is the injectors clicking a little bit, but let's see how it runs. Okay, we'll step on the gas. This thing gets up and goes. And even though it's 13 years old, corner's great. That's the thing about these Acuras. They're known for cornering. Stops on a dime, and being all-wheel drive, it's great in all kinds of weather. These things are pretty solid made. Still has the original struts all around. It doesn't ride bad at all with over 100,000 miles. These are solid built cars. You paid for them. They weren't giving them away. But a used one can be a pretty decent car if it was taken care of. Honda makes a pretty good all-wheel drive system, and this thing is killer. Especially if you live in mountains or where it snows and rains a lot. You don't mind a high price. They're excellent vehicles. And it is the first turbocharged one that Acura made. But it's not a GDI, it's just a turbo. So it kicks in when you want to go fast, and it doesn't if you're not. It didn't cause that much excessive wear in this baby. It still doesn't burn any oil, and it's 13 years old. I can't say I go for the stupid wind deflector to keep bugs off the windshield. I mean, I think that kind of takes away from the look of the car. But when you consider the luxury of getting one of these cars, you don't mind spending this kind of money. Hey, there's nothing wrong with one of these. And like I said, sure, they're not great on a gas mileage, but you don't buy a fast, racy little SUV and expect to get great gas mileage. That just doesn't happen. Even the rating systems here are a bit false. Because I have customers with late model cars that have 4-cylinder GDI turbos, and they may be rated high for gas mileage, but the way they drive them fast, they get just as poor, if not worse, gas mileage than this thing. Turbos theoretically get better gas mileage. You pump it all the time, make them spool up and spin fast and accelerate quickly, they're going to get bad gas mileage. That's just pure physics. So really, if you want a fast, great handling, mid-size SUV, there's nothing wrong with these Acuras. They are solid built cars. You don't mind the price. Now, my customer bought this used for his son. He was happy with the price, and it runs like a scalded ape, so he's totally happy with the car. Of course, he didn't fork out the $37,000 for it either. He's like me. So if you're one of those people that just feels they have to have an SUV with all-wheel drive, nothing wrong with these. Now, the 4-cylinder ones, they don't have as much power as the big old V6 ones. The V6 ones did have a tendency of burning the transmissions out in the all-wheel drive Acuras. But this is a 4-cylinder version, and I haven't seen any real problems with the transmissions in these. That was mainly in the ones with the V6 engines that had more power that burnt the all-wheel drive system out faster. Now, 10 years ago, when this RAV4 was new, went for about $24,000. Not a bad deal. It's 10 years old and it's still in excellent shape. But I do have to say on this particular one, as we start it up, it only has 52,000 miles on it. So 10 years old and that small amount of miles isn't a real test of the vehicle. They can go a lot more than that, but it's still in excellent shape. 10 years is still 10 years, regardless of the mileage. You can see on the inside, it's utilitarian. It's black and silver. It got a nice steering column. It's got the vinyl seats, typical Toyota. Freezing cold air. And when we look under the hood, it's a Toyota dual variable valve timing, the intelligent one. This baby has a legendary 4-speed automatic front wheel drive on it. My Celica has a legendary 4-speed automatic front wheel drive. My Matrix has a legendary 4-speed automatic front wheel drive transmission. These 4-speed automatics, when they finally wear out 500,000 miles, I find places that remanufacture them. And now this is unheard of. Listen to the warranty this remanufacturer of these transmission gives. Our rebuilt Toyota RAV4 transmissions come with a 5-year unlimited mile, parts, and labor warranty. Try finding another remanufactured transmission with that kind of warranty. 5 years, unlimited mileage. They pay for the labor if it goes out. These guys know these are excellent transmissions. And when they do finally get one that's broken and they rebuild it, they know they're so well made that they can give a warranty. I've had remanufactured Chrysler transmissions. You know what they come with? 1-year warranty. That's it. That shows you how well built these transmissions are. When they finally wear out, and eventually anything will wear out, if a guy can rebuild it and give that kind of a guarantee, he knows they're good transmissions. You'll never see that, like I say, in a Chrysler or other ones. Sometimes they give a couple of years, but never unlimited mileage and free labor. These guys know. They rebuild them right, they're going to last a really long time. And as an overall vehicle, it's got the classic roof rack on it. And as I said, the interior, it's utilitarian. You go into the back seat, grandkid seats, lots of room. These flip back if you need to. It's a nice RAV4 walkthrough. If you detest having trunks that open and fall and hit you on the head, nothing beats a door that opens on the back. Easy access. Got a nice swivel top to hide stuff. Good room here, and like any Toyota, you can flop these down so you have a lot more space. Well thought out, easy to get in and out too. And I kind of like the old style, having a spare tire on the back. You can put whatever symbols you want on it. It's even got decent alloys that if you cleaned them up, they'd still look good. Missing the hub here, it needs another hub, but that's just for show anyway. And the engine, got a timing chain, don't have to worry about timing belts. Being a Toyota, you ever need an alternator? This is still the original one, you can see it's dirty, but if you need one, you can go down to AutoZone any place and buy them. So let's take it for a ride. Typical Toyota, start it up, starts right up. Nice cold AC. Now the tire pressure monitoring light is on because it's got low air in the tire that I got to fill up. Now we'll give it a little acceleration test, floor it. Not a race car by any stretch of the imagination, but it goes. You can hear that transmission shifting. Shift's nice and strong. The 4-speed is working great. They're not race cars. They're not meant to be race cars. They're small SUVs. And as you're driving around, they corner quite well for a vehicle that's relatively high. And the ride is what you expect from a small SUV. Realize they're based more on a truck chassis than they are a car chassis. So you're going to feel bumps. I feel bumps in the Matrix. It runs perfectly fine. It actually handles a lot better than this because it's more of a sporty suspension. But this thing's 10 years old, still rides decent, and yeah, you can hear and feel the bumps as you hit them, but you got total control. It tracks fine. Take your hand off the steering wheel, it still tracks really well. All in all, it's an excellent small SUV. You can tell by looking out, you're relatively high up in the air, not as high as that truck, but it's still high enough for people who drive in snowy areas that if you're worried about getting stuck in the snow, this is quite a bit higher. Now, this is only the 2-wheel version. My daughter-in-law in Boston has the 4-wheel one that they use all the time in the winter and never get stuck. So you got a choice of whatever you want. Here in Texas, you're throwing your money away on all-wheel drive. Now it's 10 years old. When you look down here, you can turn the traction control off if you want to drive a little harder. And of course, realize it's a Toyota. The traction control system is well made. It's not like one of those crappy GM traction control systems that breaks all the time and costs a fortune to fix. So then most people say, the heck with it, I'll drive without traction control. The stuff's well made. 10 years later, it still works fine. Heck, 20 years later on my wife's Lexus, that still works fine. Because there's a big deal of difference between complex electronic technology like traction control that works and complex traction control systems that either don't work from the get-go or break soon after and never perform correctly. Not only do you have better safety in these things, you got better safety that keeps going year after year and not breaking down once the warranty is up. And really, even though they call it a smaller SUV, you look around, an awful lot of room inside these things. When you add it all together, lots of windows so you can see, you don't have blind spots. Because I have more customer over the years with SUVs that said we really like them, but we're always bumping into things. Fenders are bumped, bumpers are scratched up, but there's a lot of blind spots in many SUVs. They're always hitting things with them consequently. If you can't see where you're going, unless you're willing to put 4 cameras in, like that 2020 Corvette, that baby had 4 cameras, so anytime you want, when you're parking, you can see everything, front, back, and both sides. If you hit anything in that car, that's on you, not on the car. Utilitarian small SUV. You can't really do much better than this 2011 Toyota RAV4. This is an 07 Toyota Sequoia. Got the big V8 engine. Now it's only rear wheel drive. There's no front wheel drive on it. You don't need that with all this weight. Got plenty of traction. And as you can see inside, a lot of room in the front. Yeah, the leather seat's worn and torn a little. It's gonna happen when I get to be this old. And we open the back door, and what do we find? The baby seat. There's plenty of room. Got the nice leather seats, and then more seating. And we're not talking about tiny. Look, there's leg room here. This thing has a lot of space. As we open the back, we'll get an even better view. We got a nice cargo space here. Then we got the 3rd row seats. Now, of course, if you take the 3rd row seats out, then you got even more room. And if you move those forward, you got even more room. Kind of like a truck, really. Got the original Toyota hitch on it for towing. And as we can see on the top, got a big old luggage rack. Now, when it was new, this baby was about $36,000. Now, my customer recently purchased it. He's going to export it to Africa. He paid about $5 grand for it. Pretty good price for a solid vehicle like this. But when we go inside, we'll check the mileage. It does have 184,000 miles on it. Now, I have seen them with 500,000 miles on them, so they can last a long time. Well, see how this baby starts up. Turn the key. Starts right up. Now, back in the day, it didn't come with much, so somebody stuck a Pioneer stereo in it, but it still got freezing cold air conditioning in it. Nice cool air. Big old sunroof. And check this out. It's even got an entertainment system on it. This was a top-of-the-line vehicle when it was new. And being a Toyota, everything pretty much still works. It's older, so it's still got a pretty much utilitarian steering wheel. It's just got the cruise control, nothing else, and just a plain old interior. But I mean, look at the space, look at the design. This baby has a lot of space, and look at the leg room. And as we check here, look at this. It's got rear AC and heat controls too. This is a luxurious SUV. But it is 13 years old, so let's look at the data, okay? We got no trouble codes here, so let's look at the raw data, where they can't hide anything from you, at least for me. Here we go, live data. This is where the rubber meets the road. I can see what shape this vehicle actually is. I'm scrolling through, and so far everything looks pretty good, but we're gonna get pretty deep here. Short-term fuel trim. Each bank is pretty close to each other. They're just a little bit off. Something with this much mileage that's only subtracting a tiny amount of fuel like that and pretty much evenly to both cylinders is in excellent shape. From my experience with these, if somebody wanted to perform a full fuel injector cleaning service where I put my pressurized machine on, it would probably make the short-term fuel stop having to subtract stuff, because it would be spraying less fuel in. They all drip a little bit as they get a little bit aged. Now we look at the target air fuel ratio, 0.996. Now 1.0 is perfect, so it's pretty close to perfect for an old vehicle like this. And check out the variable valve timing. If you remember the Genesis I did a short time ago, they both were supposed to be 0, 0, and then when you look at what they were way off. It's still 0. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's perfect. As I showed on that Genesis at idle, the degrees were changing. They should remain at 0 when it's idling. This thing actually has more mileage than the Genesis had on it, by about 80,000 miles, yet it's still 0, perfect at idle. Shows that Toyota is making a much better engine than the Genesis has in it. We checked the misfire counts for them all 8 cylinders, they're all 0. That's perfect. So for such an old vehicle, it's in immaculate shape. Now let's check under the hood. And what do we have under here? Big old 4.7 liter V8 engine. But do realize this is a big, heavy vehicle. 13 miles a gallon in the city and about 15 miles a gallon on a highway. They are gas guzzlers. There's no ifs and buts about these things. Most of my customers that own them, they never check their gas mileage. I ask them, well, what kind of gas mileage are you going to say? It's got to be so bad, we don't even want to know. We just fill it up with gas all the time. But with the coming recession and oil prices going down, hey, gasoline's going to be cheaper for quite some time, it looks like. Now, being a Toyota, hey, they don't break down that often, but one big disadvantage of this V8 engine is they hide the starter way under there. You got to take the intake manifold, the top of the engine off to replace the starter. Bad design for sure, but I got my borescope out and looked at this. It still has the original starter on it. At some point in time, that'll have to be changed, and it's an expense because of that design. But it's not a reason not to buy a vehicle. The anti-lock braking system still works perfectly. Heck, it's still got the original radiator and it's not leaking. And look, here's something you won't even see today. The headlights are still clear. And the new ones, oh, they fade pretty fast. They even used to make the headlights better. These are plastic ones. The newer ones are cheaper. And as you can see under the front, coolers galore. Special coolers here. Got a coolant fan for the AC condenser. Got a big old fan for the engine. Huge. I got friends that live in deserts. They love these things. They don't overheat. They are made to take high temperatures and throw that heat out. Even the wheels are holding up. I mean, they ain't clean and they're dirty, but hey, front and back, they're still solid. A few hits on a curb, but you can polish that off if you want. Let's close the hood and take it for a spin. Solid hood too. Corner's pretty smooth. Yeah, it's a big truck, but step on the gas, see what happens. Now it has a big V8 engine, but it is heavy. It takes off, but you know, it's not a race car. You can go fast, but it's awful top heavy. I would not advise racing around in these things like a maniac on curves. Ride's good. Let's hit these big bumps in the road. See, I mean, it handles them pretty well. It is a truck after all. I mean, it's not going to ride like a Lexus, but it handles the bumps quite well, even with all this mileage on it. And look at this, 184,000 miles, still idles, no shaking. This is a quality giant SUV. There's no arguing that. Hello! It's got cavernous room here. So now you know the truth about Toyota Sequoias. And if you're looking for a big 3-row seating SUV, hey, it might be what you're looking for, if you don't mind expensive gas bills. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.